Have you ever noticed something strange in business? A large company can spend millions on advertising and still struggle to build trust. Meanwhile, a single person with a camera, a phone, and a small audience can influence buying decisions every day. And honestly, this happens far more often than most people realize. Because when people make buying decisions, they are not only evaluating products, they're evaluating trust, they're evaluating credibility, and most importantly, they're evaluating people. This is why a recommendation from a friend often feels more powerful than a professional advertisement. It's why customers follow certain creators for years. And it's why personal brands have become so influential in today's digital world. Now, this doesn't mean companies no longer matter. Of course they do. But something important has changed. People are increasingly looking for human connection before they make decisions. They want to know who's behind the business, who is sharing the advice, who is making the promise. Because trust is easier to build when there is a person attached to the message. And honestly, this is one of the biggest reasons marketing has changed so dramatically over the last decade. The businesses growing fastest today are often not the ones with the biggest budgets. They're the ones creating the strongest human connections. If you've ever wondered why some creators can sell products so easily, why personal brands seem to grow faster, or why customers often trust people more than companies, you're about to discover why. Because in this video, we're going to break down why human connection influences buying decisions, why personal trust often beats corporate messaging, and why the most successful businesses understand the psychology behind both. Because once you understand this, you stop seeing marketing as a battle for attention and start seeing it as a process of building relationships. And in today's economy, that difference matters more than ever. One of the biggest reasons people buy from people instead of companies is that trust has always been a human experience. And honestly, this isn't a new idea. Long before social media existed, people relied on recommendations from friends. They trusted family members, they listened to people they knew. Because trust naturally develops between humans, not between logos, not between websites, and not between marketing messages. Now, this doesn't mean companies cannot earn trust. Of course, they can. But most companies earn trust through the people connected to them. The founder, the owner, the employees, the customers, the people telling the story behind the business. Because when people evaluate a message, they often ask themselves a simple question. Who is saying this? And that question matters more than many businesses realize. The same advice can feel completely different depending on who delivers it. The same product can feel more valuable when recommended by someone people trust. The same message can create stronger belief when it comes from a person rather than a company. Now, something important starts happening. As the internet becomes more crowded, people look for signals they can trust. And one of the strongest signals is human connection. A face, a voice, a story, a real person sharing a real experience. Because trust is easier to build when people feel connected to the source. This is why personal brands have become so powerful. Not because people suddenly stopped buying from businesses, but because people feel more comfortable trusting humans than institutions. And honestly, once businesses understand this, marketing often becomes much more effective. Because instead of trying to appear bigger, they start becoming more relatable. And that's where trust usually begins. One of the biggest reasons people buy from people is that human beings are naturally wired for connection. And honestly, this influences far more buying decisions than most people realize. Because when people evaluate a product, they are not only evaluating features, they are evaluating feelings. Do I trust this person? Do they understand my problem? Do I believe they can help me? And those questions are often answered emotionally before they are answered logically. Now, something important starts happening when people feel connected to someone. They become more open to listening, more open to learning, and more open to considering recommendations. Because connection reduces uncertainty, it creates familiarity. And familiarity often creates comfort. This is why two businesses can offer nearly identical products, yet receive very different responses. One feels distant, the other feels human. One feels transactional, the other feels relatable. And in many cases, people choose the option that feels more personal, not because the product is necessarily better, but because the relationship feels stronger. This is why stories are so powerful, why customer experiences matter, and why audiences often remember people more than marketing messages. Because humans connect with humans, not with slogans, not with corporate language, and not with perfectly polished sales messages. This is also why personal brands have become so influential online. A face creates familiarity. A voice creates connection. A story creates meaning. And together, those elements make trust easier to build. Because at the end of the day, most buying decisions are not just financial decisions. They're emotional decisions supported by logic afterward. And honestly, the businesses that understand human connection often gain an advantage that advertising alone cannot buy. One of the biggest reasons personal brands have become so powerful is that they naturally make trust easier to build. And honestly, this has very little to do with follower count, because trust is not created by audience size alone. It's created by familiarity, consistency, and repeated exposure over time. Now think about what happens when someone follows a personal brand. They see the same person repeatedly, they hear the same voice, they learn the person's values, they watch their experiences. And over time, a relationship starts forming, not a personal friendship, but a sense of familiarity. And familiarity changes how people evaluate information, because the more familiar someone feels, the less uncertainty people experience. This is why recommendation from a creator often feels different from a traditional advertisement. The audience already knows who is speaking. They understand the context, and they have a history with that person. Now compare that to many businesses. The company logo stays visible, the website stays visible, the products stay visible, but the people behind the business often remain invisible. And when the human connection disappears, trust becomes harder to develop. This is why many successful businesses are becoming more human today. Founders appear on camera, teams share stories, experts become visible, because audiences increasingly want to know who is behind the message, not just what is being sold. And honestly, personal brands are not powerful because people love personalities. They're powerful because they make trust easier to build. Because in today's marketplace, people rarely connect with a logo. They connect with the human being behind it. One of the biggest challenges businesses face today is not a lack of quality. And honestly, it's not always a lack of trust either. Many companies provide excellent products, excellent services, excellent customer experiences. Yet despite all of that, they often struggle to create the same emotional connection as a person. Because companies naturally communicate differently. They use brand messaging, corporate language, professional positioning. And while those things can be valuable, they can also create distance. Now something important starts happening. The audience sees the company, but they don't always see the people behind it. They see the logo, but not the story. They see the offer, but not the human experience behind the offer. And when human visibility decreases, emotional connection often decreases as well. This is why many businesses feel less relatable than creators or personal brands. Not because they are less trustworthy, but because they feel less personal. And in today's marketplace, personal often feels safer. more familiar, more believable. This is especially true online, where people are making decisions without face-to-face interactions, without conversations, without traditional relationship building. Now, the human element becomes even more important. This is why audiences increasingly want to know who founded the company, who created the product, who stands behind the promise. Because understanding the people behind the business reduces uncertainty. And honestly, many businesses don't need better marketing. They need more visible humanity. Because in a world full of companies, the businesses that feel human often become easier to trust. One of the biggest shifts happening in business today is the rise of the creator economy. And honestly, this shift is much bigger than social media. Because what we're really seeing is a change in how trust is distributed. Years ago, large companies controlled most of the attention. They controlled advertising, they controlled media exposure, and they controlled many of the channels people use to discover products and information. But the internet changed that. Now, a single creator can share knowledge. A single person can influence buying decisions across thousands or even millions of people. And that changes everything because audiences no longer rely only on companies for information. They can learn directly from individuals. Now, something important starts happening. Trust starts moving closer to people, closer to personalities, closer to creators, closer to experts who consistently show up and share their experiences. This is why many creators have become incredibly influential, not because they always have the biggest platforms, but because they often have the strongest relationships with their audiences. People know them, people recognize them, people understand their story. And over time, that familiarity creates influence. This doesn't mean companies are becoming irrelevant. Far from it. Most successful creators still rely on products, services, and businesses. But the path to trust has changed. Because increasingly people discover businesses through people first, not the other way around. And honestly, the creator economy is not really about content. It's about human connection at scale. Because when trust becomes the most valuable currency in business, the people who earn trust naturally become more influential. One of the biggest misconceptions in modern marketing is believing that businesses must become personal brands to stay relevant. And honestly, that's not true. Most customers still buy from businesses. Most products still come from companies. And most successful brands still operate as organizations. But the smartest businesses understand something important. People connect with people first. So instead of hiding behind the company, they make the humans behind the business more visible. Now, something interesting starts happening. The founder shares insights. The team shares experiences. Experts within the company become visible. Customers share stories. And suddenly, the business starts feeling more relatable, more approachable, more trustworthy. Because audiences are no longer interacting with a logo alone. They're interacting with real people. This is why many successful brands today invest heavily in human-centered communication. Not just product marketing, not just advertising, but storytelling, transparency, education, and real conversations. Because every time a business reveals the people behind the brand, trust becomes easier to build. This is why some companies feel remarkably human even at a large scale. What they believe and why they exist. And honestly, the goal is not to make a company look smaller. It's to make the company feel more human. Because in today's marketplace, businesses don't need to choose between being professional and being personal. The brands that grow fastest often learn how to be both. When people make buying decisions, they are rarely searching for a product alone. And honestly, this is one of the most misunderstood parts of marketing because most businesses focus on what they sell, but buyers focus on what they risk. Will this work? Will this solve my problem? Will this be worth the investment? Can I trust the person or company behind it? And those questions create uncertainty. Now, something important happens. The more uncertainty people feel, the harder it becomes to make a decision. This is why trust plays such a powerful role in business, because trust reduces uncertainty. It makes people feel more confident moving forward, more confident spending money, more confident taking action. And this is where human connection becomes so valuable. A trusted person can often reduce uncertainty faster than a detailed sales page. A believable recommendation can carry more weight than a long list of features, because buyers are not only evaluating the product, they're evaluating the risk of making the wrong decision. This is why the businesses that earn trust consistently often outperform businesses that simply promote harder. Not because they have better marketing tactics, but because they make buyers feel safer, more informed, more confident. And honestly, when you look closely at most successful businesses, they are not simply selling products. They are helping people feel comfortable saying yes. Because at the end of the day, buyers are not looking for more information. They're looking for enough confidence to take the next step. After everything we've discussed in this video, one thing should be clear. People don't buy from people because people are more persuasive. And honestly, they don't buy from people because companies stopped mattering. The real reason is much simpler. People trust what feels human because human connection reduces uncertainty. It creates familiarity. It creates credibility. And it makes decisions feel safer. This is why a recommendation from someone you trust can influence you more than a polished advertisement. It's why creators have become so influential. And it's why businesses are increasingly making the people behind their brands more visible. Not because products became less important, but because trust became more important. And in today's marketplace, trust is often built person to person before it is built business to business. This is why the most successful brands understand something many companies overlook. People are not only evaluating products, they're evaluating relationships. They're asking, can I trust this? Do I believe this? Does this feel genuine? Because before people buy a product, they usually buy confidence. Confidence in the recommendation, confidence in the business, confidence in the person behind the message. And honestly, that is what makes human connection so powerful. Now, if this video helped you understand why people buy from people, not companies, make sure to explore the other videos already available on the channel as well. We've been breaking down marketing psychology, trust, audience behavior, content visibility, branding, and the hidden reasons people make buying decisions. Because once you understand how trust, attention, and human behavior work together, marketing becomes much easier to understand. Thanks for watching, stay connected, and I'll see you in the next video.